All right, folks, working on a 2013 Chevrolet. It's got the big 5.3. It's CLC9. A lot of miles, 200,000 on this thing. Money lights on, inspections due, of course. Guy needs to get that fixed, but he's been working on this P219A and a P219B, which are cylinder fuel trim and balance codes, bank 1 and bank 2. Relatively common on newer GMs with GDI, and this one is not a GDI engine, so you don't see it on these a lot, but you do see it now and then. It's a hard code really to put your finger on or be 100% and say it is this. It's this part right here. This is what you need. But I'll show you what I look at, things I check, and what I usually suggest to my customers that fixes it. Well, it's fixed it every time so far. So what I'll do on these is there's things that can cause it. Aftermarket air intakes, aftermarket exhausts. Those are your two biggest. If they got big Ken and Nancy filter hanging out here, that'll really screw these up. So we check for that. And in this case, I looked at this guy's checking out his air filter, seeing what he has in it. And the first thing I noticed is that the air box was broken. So I put this screw in down here. It was missing both the bottom screws. Only had the top screws. The bottom of the box, this ear was busted off, or is busted off. You can see it's kind of hanging there. And the bottom of the box is popped open. That causes some pretty irregular mass airflow readings. It actually usually makes them read quite high. And this one is reading like 7.9 grams per second at an idle, fully warmed up, where typically these would run, closer to 6, upper 5, 5.8 to 6, somewhere in there. So it would be my suggestion to this fella, this needs to be fixed because this can be a contributing factor to the cylinder imbalance problems. So we'll just get a used upper half, which I already did. I went down to Wilbert's, grabbed one of these with new screws. And he does have a factory GM filter in it, which is good. The other thing that we like to do is check the fuel injectors. And the only way I can check those is just a fuel balance test. So we use a scan tool, we go through and do a fuel injector balance test to make sure they drop equally in pressure. And these did, give or take about a half a PSI. The other big player in this, and this is probably the most important one, are the upstream O2 sensors. They have to be OEM. These trucks are quite particular with these. I see it has one aftermarket over there and what appears to be the OEM over here. Watching them on scan data, they're pretty slow, pretty sluggish, and don't really seem to respond well. So in a case like this, the other thing I do also is check for vacuum leaks in the intake manifold. And you'll find all that in service data looking up those codes. So hook up the Avoca smoker. This thing was sealed tight. So that was my suggestion to the customer. Let's fix the air intake system. Let's clean the mass airflow because that's pretty dirty, and put 2 factory upstream O2 sensors in it. And 99% of the time that takes care of your fuel imbalance codes on these sequential injection motors versus the GDIs. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. I was gonna do the full video on it, and then it's like, well, fuel trim and balance codes are difficult to prove at best. So I decided not to, then I decided, well, I will. I'll show you what the process I go through is. Just did one of these the other day on a newer Buick, same thing. So, and that why I say the other day, it was like 4 months ago. So we're gonna pull out his air filter, show you that. It's not super dirty, so we're not gonna change it, but it is genuine General Motors. You can tell because it's made right here in America. So we'll stick that back on. Here's the lid I got for them. I think they're exactly the same. The bottom half is different because this came off a Tahoe, a 2011 Tahoe, and it used the light duty air filter. So the part number is a little different on the bottom half. So I grabbed just the top half. Screw that on. We see these, if they come in and they have a cold air intake and a Gibson dual sport hanging out the back, and it's throwing fuel trim and balance codes. Typically the customer doesn't want to put on the factory air filter assembly and factory exhaust, so usually we don't fix those, even though 90% of the time the customer will admit, like, yeah, it was right after we did the exhaust, but it can't be the exhaust or the air intake, or vice versa. So, but these ones that are bone stock, usually this will always cure it. Fix any of your air intake problems, factory air filter, factory upstream O2s, check your injectors. Make sure you have no leaks, no massive exhaust manifold leaks, anything before the converters. So there's that. The other thing I had to get, let's see, I snagged, it was missing one of the rubbers that goes down in the bottom, so I grabbed one of those from Wilbert's too. One of the ones that goes on here, right? Yep, it's that one there. So we'll set that back down in there. This thing was just kind of flopping around in here. He said the screws have been broke for a little bit of time now. About as long as he's been having the problem. Go figure. There, it's all snapped in. There's that. Now we'll swap our mass airflow over. Looks like a T15 maybe. Oh yeah, first try. Take that little guy out. Oh yeah, this side of it's pretty dirty. I can see it without even a magnifying glass. I'm gonna grab a Q-tip. Got some Berry Man mass airflow cleaner. You used to use the CRC stuff, but it seems every can you get leaks. They just piss all over the top. They're terrible. So I put a little bit on a Q-tip here. Yeah, this side's way dirty. I'm just gonna reach in just very lightly. Touch that hot wire. Oh yeah. That's probably hard to see on camera. Puts a little schmutz there on the end of the Q-tip. It doesn't take much on a mass airflow sensor. Be very careful if you're using a Q-tip. These things break very easily and they're quite expensive. And you have to use OEM. Aftermarket mass airflows, they will screw up these, they'll set these codes too. They usually create other problems, but mass airflow sensor is a pretty big player. I think that's good. I'm gonna give her a little douche. Alright, shiny. Stick that little guy down in there. Got our screws back in it. This side here is pretty hard to see as far as recording it because it's right. Oh, whoa! Man, it's right here behind the drive shaft. And then I've also got the oil draining out of this. I got one oil change while it was in. And that's also something to be mindful of because that can also start tripping fuel trim codes and fuel trim and balance codes if you have, gas contaminated oil or it's, way overdue. So that's something to bear in mind also. See if these crack loose. Yep, actually that one really wasn't it. See all the wires are twisted up on it, like somebody's had the thing out of here, and the connector that hooks up by the trainee was already out of its little holder. There we go. Now, I did mention that you need to use OEM, but I mean genuine GM from a brick and mortar store, like from a dealer. So here's the one we took out. This is an aftermarket Denso. This one here is the OEM. You can see the physical difference between them. But the reason I say from a brick and mortar, like a local Chevy dealer, is because there is so many counterfeits online. If you're getting it from Amazon or eBay, it's almost 100% guaranteed it is not genuine. And then this here is the aftermarket out of the other side. And there's our OEM. So I'll get that slid up in there. It's kind of hard to show you those. That one lives right there in the top of the exhaust pipe right off the manifold. I know it's not focusing. And then the connector for it is right up there by those transmission lines. Or at least that's where it's supposed to go. I don't know if you can kind of see it in there. And then over here, same thing. The upstream O2 lives, way at the top there. Oh, this isn't focusing very well. Could be the lighting. And then plugs in over here and then reattaches back up on that harness. All right. The other thing that has to be considered when you're doing one of these is look in scan data and see what your fuel alcohol content is. See if it's skewed, 18, 20%. Not enough to start setting rich codes, but enough to start causing problems. And then if it is off, check the fuel in the customer's car. You can do a quick fuel alcohol sample, take out some fuel and see how much ethanol is actually in it. There's little kits you can buy, or if you have a graduated cylinder, you can do that yourself. We may have already mentioned that alcohol thing earlier, I don't recall. But the other thing to think about is when you're on the topic of gasoline is also to make sure that you're using, gas from a station that sells top tier fuels. And you can learn more about that online. Just search, top tier gas stations near me. They'll probably bring you up to a search finder and explain to you more about what makes certain gasoline in a top tier category. I did have a customer, this is just a one isolated case, that had a 15 Silverado. It was a GDI engine, 5.3, and he would get cylinder imbalance codes, but only at one gas station. And it was kind of neat because, to prove that, he would do tank after tank after tank of a certain gas station, and then he would fill up one time at this other gas station that didn't sell top tier fuel. It just happened to be they weren't top tier fuel. And within about 15 miles from leaving, he would have an engine light for fuel trim and balance on both banks for that entire tank of gas. He'd run that tank of gas out of it, get gas at any other, station, and the light would clear itself and it would be out for, months at a time, to the point I almost didn't believe him. And then he would prove it to me. And he did this a couple, 2 or 3 times just to make sure this is just the gas at this gas station that screws in my truck. And, it certainly was the case. So haven't seen it a lot, but I would say if you're kind of combating this, your upstream O2s are good, everything else checks out good. Find out where the customer is getting fuel. See if it's the same place every single time, or if they're, a little here, a little there, because it can make a difference. So I'm kind of hoping that this video sheds a little bit of light on these two codes and perhaps some of the process that needs to be done, prior to anything else. Sometimes with codes like this that you just, you can't 100% put your finger on. I mean, we could scope that O2 sensor, but how the PCM analyzes its, rate of change in frequency over time, that's pretty difficult to do, if not impossible, because it goes in correlation with, crank signal and which cylinders, who's firing when. There's a lot into that algorithm. So we can basically look and see what we see is broke or needs attention, on the air intake system, on the exhaust side of things, engine mechanical side of it, basically all the same stuff that it will state within service data. And then if need be, we go further from there. We're gonna clear these codes out. And then I'm gonna fire it up and look at some data, particularly our O2s and our mass airflow. Probably should have showed you guys some before data, but like I said, I was contemplating not even doing a video on this one. So I've let it warm up here a little bit, just kind of looking through, fuel trim, seeing where they're at. The thing I'm really happy about is looking at the switch ratio on these O2 sensors. I wish I would have captured the data prior, but it was the switch ratio was nothing like this. They were, really jagged, holding high, dropping low, just really, really sluggish, slow to respond. Our mass airflow is now back down around 5.1 to 5.2 or so, somewhere in there, where we were in the upper, sevens, grams per second before. So our mass airflow is reading pretty crazy. But just looking at this, looking at a baseline, I'm pretty confident that we've nailed this one. We know the code. I'm gonna look to see. I don't think the 219 won't run until we drive it here. Find it here. Okay, so 219A, 219. Oops, I saw them there. So these are the codes that have not run yet. Yeah, 219A and B. I haven't run this cycle. I'm going to take and drive it just to see. I don't know if they'll run until the O2 monitors have set. We'll find out though. Good day for a drive anyways. Man, I sure missed that weather we were having last week. I had the garage doors open, February 8th or 9th it was. Garage doors open, it was in the low 60s. I don't ever remember that in my life, but it was pretty amazing. It was only for a couple days and now we're back to reality. It's back to freezing again. Let's see where we're at here, see if the 219's still in here. Should have ran by now, I would think. Okay, 219. Nope, it already ran. So these go numerically or sequentially, and we go right up to 4176. So the 219A and the 219B have already ran and passed. Well, I assume they passed. What we'll do is we'll pop out of here and we'll go back to some generic OBD2 data. Make sure there's no pending code. Sometimes in the OEM data, I don't know if it brings up pending codes quite right, but I know the generic side always does. So we'll look in here. Actually, it ran a few monitors on that test drive. I'm kind of surprised. Probably have a permanent code in here. Yeah, we do, yeah. So, oh, that's odd. It only stored a permanent for one side. But yeah, no pending codes. So that's good. And even on that short drive, we ran a few of the monitors. 3 left to complete, so all he's got to do is drive it now and get it to pass inspection, or take it and get it inspected rather. So we're going to leave this one at that, folks. I wish I would have shown you a little bit of the before processor by, you know, data gathering portion of it, but I just didn't know how well received it would be with the YouTube, because typically we come and we put our finger on something tangible and say this part is broken, or, you know, it needs this because we, you know, we scoped it. And in a case like this, it can be a little bit difficult where we're looking at, you know, big picture items. You know, is anything affecting the air intake system, the exhaust, the fuel? You know, particularly when you're looking at single cylinder imbalance codes, where they're not specific to a single cylinder, if that makes sense. Some cars have the ability to tell you which cylinder is, you know, has the imbalance, where General Motors, at least in this vintage, will just tell you which bank. You know, there's an imbalance between cylinders on this bank. So I feel pretty confident in it. I've done enough of them, or I've seen enough of them, where it's usually something silly like this. Like I say, aftermarket parts is the biggest one. You know, you get kind of Nancy in the airbox, and, you know, it's oil on the mass airflow, and, you know, a high flow rate, and they can really screw with these. On the GDIs, it's almost exclusively injectors, but doing an injector balance test, that shows up. You know, and you know, on this one here with the broken air box, the aftermarket O2 sensors, those are huge key players in determining, you know, is the cylinder fuel trim balance equal between the cylinders, if you will. So having OEM sensors in there is super critical. If you're working on this on your own truck, and I would say even if yours are OEM, but they're 200,000 miles old, you know, put a couple in it. Yeah, that sounds like a big fat guess, but like I say, make sure you're getting them from a brick and mortar store. That's important, that you go and you actually get genuine GM ones. So not eBay, not Amazon, not, you know, whatever.com. I can't even think of something stupid to say. Imagine that. Mrs. O would be proud. And I'd be proud of you if you go in that comment section, leave a comment, a question, a concern you have. Find us on the Insta, the Facebook. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, pointing too early, you can do it. Thanks for watching.